Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our caregiver conversations. This is part two of our interview with Miss Loretta Veney, um, and we will be discussing her book um, titled Being My Mom's Mom, and also her experience with writing from her perspective as a caregiver for someone with dementia. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for, bringing all of your experience and resources. Can you tell me a little bit about your caregiving story and kind of your process of wanting to write your book?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. Yeah, this process, wow, it was really something. When my mom was diagnosed with dementia in 2006, it's shocking for everybody to, get that diagnosis, but it was really shocking for us. And the reason was my mom was 77 years old, which, seems like, okay, well, she lived a good life, but they live a long time in our family. My great grandmother lived to be 106. So when my mother was diagnosed at 77, I'm thinking, she might outlive my money. That was my first thought. That was absolutely my first thought. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do to help pay for my mother's care? And it was my first thought because back in the day when my mother was a secretary for the federal government, African Americans were very low grades. You could, so her retirement check was, little to nothing. And so I knew I wouldn't be able to pay these huge monthly fees for assisted living, which of course we had promised our mom we would, let her live independently, if you will. So that was really scary because I wasn't sure, how this would play out for us. So not only was the finances, scary because I didn't know what I didn't know, but also I was had no planning for it. My mother was the first person to be diagnosed. It wasn't in our family, anything. So I'm thinking the only thing I knew about Alzheimer's was that, it's just something you thought old people get. Hmm. Okay. So I jump online. I'm reading everything I can possibly read. And I just felt so overwhelmed by it. And I was like, is anybody else this unprepared or is it just me? So that was really how the first book, Being My Mom's Mom, came about. Because I felt that, if you talk to other, especially other African Americans about it, it was kind of a thing nobody talked about. You know what I mean? It was like you go to some of the black churches and they'd say, well, we should have a forum or something about Alzheimer's. Oh no, we don't have that here. You're like, I'm looking at this person over here who has no idea where they are, but no, okay. And so it was kind of, odd. Like, suppose somebody else needs this information. It was scary for me. So I started writing in my youth. I had already been always not a journaler per se. I had a couple journals, but I was always recording stuff. I had the, tape recorder at first, of course. Back in the day, you had a Walkman. I recorded everything. I was just always recording events just to kind of remember it later. And that really helped me for my mom. I had already, because I already wrote down a lot of stuff about her, especially, trying to track her medicines in the beginning and things like that. So it just became natural that I was recording doctor visits and all kinds of things. So I had all the data I really needed to write the book. I just started writing. So that's how it came about. I was hoping to um, save other people from feeling as overwhelmed and unprepared as I was. That was really the reason for the book in a nutshell. So,
Thank you. That seems to kind of like, I guess, lead right into my next question of about your inspiration for sharing your story. And you just said that you wanted to share your story as a way to kind of let other people know that this is an experience that you had, and that if they are going through something similar,
Right.
here's how you went through it. And kind of just giving that that feeling of support to other people who may come across your book and they're just like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then they read yours and then they're like, okay, so I'm not the only person who
That's
was
correct.
confused. Or so I think that
Really
that's
true.
just very powerful.
I think that's so true because you think, and so I talk about it's a pretty honest book, and so I'm very honest about some of the things you need to be a caregiver. So I talk about forgiveness in the book. A lot of times, in families, there's grudges and all kinds of things, and family secrets and all kinds of stuff that really can prevent people from being the best caregiver they could be in a way. And so I talk about the requirement of forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself for some of the things you can't do on a daily basis. That like, oh, I didn't get mom in the shower today. Okay, there's always tomorrow. You can't beat yourself up on the things that you didn't get to. But a lot of times we also have to forgive our loved ones for things that they had done in the past or whatever. And so that was key for me. One of the biggest issues in our life was that I was born at home. My father delivered me basically, and then a few days later he left. I had a sister who was 9 at the time, and she, sort of blamed me for my dad leaving because it had nothing to do with either of us, but none of, we didn't know that. And so when my mom's dementia had gotten to the point that she could no longer have a normal conversation, I found out the family secret, if you will, that it was my mother who sort of forced my dad to leave. And so I thought, wow, I had spent my whole life trying to find my father. And my mother sat there and kind of watched all that. And so obviously I was devastated by that secret. But at the time, I also knew I was all my mother had. So when I speak at churches about forgiveness and about caregiving, I talk about how you have to let all that go and start, day one of her diagnosis was really the first day of the rest of our lives. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, and I'm very honest about that. I also am very honest about the fact of how much patience it takes to be a great caregiver. You have to go close yourself in the closet, count to 10, whatever it is. You have to walk away from a lot of things. When we used to go out all the time, every place we went, people always commented on how patient I was with my mom. You know how in this disease, they repeat everything over and over and over and over. And people look around like, oh my God, I wish she stopped saying that. And I get asked all the time, how do you do that? You're so patient with her. And, I pretend like, it's the first time she ever asked me a question, every time she asked, that kind of thing. And so you come up with different little strategies to work through that. But I talk a lot about that in the book. And so originally it came out in 2013. And there were so many changes in the progression of the disease that I ended up doing, a second edition that came out in 2019. And so that was able to sort of fill some of the gaps for people once she had gotten to like the middle to the later stages that she's in now. Because obviously the behavioral challenges and things like that, the funny things that happen, I write a lot about humor in the book, and people really appreciate the humor. And so it's been, really interesting from that standpoint. I got one of the best things the other day. I was feeling a little bit down. Obviously, hadn't seen my mom, of course, and I was just feeling, kind of down, and the weather was cold. You couldn't go outside and things like that. And all of a sudden, I get this email from a woman I don't remember at all. She emails to say she came to see me at a conference in October of 2019. And she wanted to let me know that she had read my book over and over and over, and how it had continued to inspire her to keep going. Wow, that was like the best email ever. I didn't give her name or anything, but I put part of it on Facebook, and she said, "Thank you for continuing to inspire me." But I was like, holy cow. that's what you live for when you write a book. You want people to try the strategies that have worked for you and to see, now not all strategies work for all people, as we know, but at least I give some starting points to have, and that was sort of the best, support I could get, or confirmation that I am making a difference. And that email meant everything to me. It was like just out of the blue, amazing. So that was so helpful.
Wow, yes, it seems like your inspiration to share your story was kind of like the future inspiration that you would like bring out in other people,
Yeah.
and kind of inspiring them to just, I guess, put forth the patience
Yes.
and the forgiveness and the humor that you need in this situation.
And it was
I think
amazing because
that,
she was the woman that wrote it was a pediatrician in Southern Virginia. And for somebody with that level of expertise and being a doctor and all that, to say that she had learned so much and been inspired by it, that was just amazing. So I think that the book has done what I originally intended, and that was to kind of lift people up when they're down and to sort of give them some strategies as well. So
thank you. And I think that with that goal in mind, of wanting to bring about that inspiration, that feeling of just comfort in knowing that this experience is not, the end all be all for some people. And I think that by having that goal in mind as you wrote, I think that's what made it very successful, and what made it kind of just stand out to a lot of people and really just guide them through their time as a caregiver, and or just guide them through any difficulty that they might be facing, as a loved one might have been diagnosed with dementia or some other disease. And I think that since you had that thought process going in, it's just what made everything successful with your book, and it just shine a light onto it. So I know that some people find that writing their experiences or kind of just sharing what they're going through is therapeutic in a way. So do you think that that was your experience with writing? Did you find comfort in sharing that experience with others?
I definitely felt that when you are going through this, you try to take every challenge or difficulty, face it head on, and that can be difficult. And so before, the biggest change between the two editions was, like I said, when my husband died, my thought process was, what do I do now? He drove my mother everywhere. He would pick her up while I was at work. They would do lunch. He would drive her to the doctor's appointments. So I would only have to take a couple hours off work. I would meet them at the doctor's office and do the appointment, and he would drive her back, and I would go straight back to work. And it was we called ourselves Team Veney. And after he was gone, I thought, wow, how am I going to do all that? And so I thought the book was very helpful for me in that. I ended up writing about that process too, how I sort of overcame that. But again, it was about finding support. So basically what happened when my husband died, my church created a support group just for me. And they asked me to write down all the things that my husband had done for my mother, before he died. And each one of the people in the group took a task. And so that helped me tremendously. So I wrote about that in the book too, stressing that you're not going to ever be able to do this by yourself, ever. And I know people say, well, I don't want people in my house. Okay, but there are times you can't be there with them all the time. You either gonna have to let somebody come in or take them to adult daycare, but at least have a plan. So what I hope I've done is help people plan more effectively for what is coming. So for example, since I am now, all my mother has, my sister died and my husband died. So I ended up putting my house in a trust for my mother. So, if I get hit by a car or I die of COVID or something, the sale of my house would pay for my mother's care. And so my daughter would get what was left once my mother was gone. And so those are the decisions that you have to make. And so I tried to share that with the audience reading the book to know you don't just have to plan for today that I'm caring for mom today. You also have to plan for the future. So the attorney who wrote the trust for my house asked, in these group homes, what's the succession plan for them if the owner dies? What happens to all the residents? You're like, oh, never thought of that. And so you need people who are well versed in other areas to help you. And I put all of that in the book. So and so people said, well, how do we know the difference between the first and the second edition? So the cover is different. So the cover on this book, has me, in a recent picture, and the first edition had me at 10 years old. And it was me and her all sitting in the same position almost, but I was 10 years old on the cover of the first one. So that's how people know the difference between the two editions. So that was kind of cool. But I also wanted people to know I left it exactly as it was written in the first one, and then I added a couple of chapters onto the end and new pictures of things we had done together. So that's the primary difference between the two editions of Being My Mom's Mom.
Thank you. I think that hearing you speak about that feeling of like after your losses, feeling like you have lost that support, but then your church gave you that support back, and kind of just let you know that you still have
Yes.
a support system. You have a foundation of people who are here and ready to help in any way that they can. And I think that a lot of caregivers can feel very alone sometimes with their journey and feeling that they don't have that support. So I think that your example of your church offering that support just really hit home for me. And I think it can honestly spark something in other caregivers to think about and realize that they do have support that is ready and waiting for them to use. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that that's a very important topic to let caregivers know that they're not doing everything alone, and that there are people who will help, even if it's just, something simple or something small. And I wanted to go back to our last session. You had mentioned your friend had gotten you 2 pillows with a picture of your mother and you, for both of you to have and hug when you miss each other, or just if you want to see each other's face, or if your mother just wants to admire how great she looked that day. So I think that it's things like that that caregivers should know, that there will be people who are willing to, just give you any kind of support.
I agree.
That they can. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else you would like to share with everyone today in our episode of Caregiver Conversation?
Sure. There are a couple things, and one of the things that really hits on the point that you just brought up about being inspired by different things, whether it's a pillow or whatever. And the second book I wrote, I dedicated to my husband, and it's called Refreshment for the Caregiver Spirit. And what's cool about this book is it's just a book of these really cool pictures that my husband and I took around the world. And I added inspirational sayings to each of the pictures. And the hope was that if you're having a really down day, you could look at some of the pictures and feel lifted. And it's called Refreshment for the Caregiver Spirit because my mother's favorite word was always refreshment. No matter where we would go, she would say, "Where are the refreshments?" They're like, oh my gosh. And so I wanted her, to be in the title. And the picture on the cover is Naples, Italy. And my husband took this picture. And we were on this hike in Naples. And I was in one spot and he was in another. And, I convinced him to come down where I was, but that meant we had to go like 300 steps back up. So he was not happy with me. So we get, getting ready to go back up. And he said, "This better be the cover of your next book." And so when I tell that story in my presentations, and then I show the picture first, and then I show the book, I'm like, yay. And, because I dedicated, it came out 2 months after he died, but he knew we were doing it. He had picked some of his favorite pictures. So it's about 160 pictures in the book. But what I hear a lot from families, one of the pictures we took in Dubai, I had spoken in Dubai, and we went on this hot air balloon ride over this desert. And I took a picture of a balloon in front of us. And the caption, because I hear a lot in these support groups about negative people in your own life that are trying to tell you how to do caregiving. And one of the captions, the caption I put on the hot air balloon picture of the balloon in front of us was, "Encourage the negative people in your life to fly away." And I put that because so many people, the people aren't helping you do anything, but they criticize and everything. And some people, one lady said, "Can I blow it up as a poster?" And so some places I've spoken, they put it in the elevator, all kinds of things. But there's so much inspiration. There's a picture in Switzerland of these huge mountains, and we're surrounded by them. And I said, don't let mountainous obstacles overcome you. Find your village. And it was this small Swiss village of all these beautiful houses, in the middle of this huge mountain range. And that's the caption: find who in your village can help you, and just different ways of doing it. And then the coloring book I created was because sometimes you have to make your own solution. And you know how when you're coloring, you stay inside the lines and everything. And when the dementia is progressing, they can't do that. Just like little kids can't, color in the lines, they color all over the place. And so I call it an intergenerational coloring book, so that and it was just big areas where they can color. And I put her picture on the back because she helped me pick it out and everything. And I think what I always want people to know is, even if you have to make your own solution, there's a solution to pretty much every challenge. And that's what I think I want to leave the caregivers with, not to lose hope. There's always a way you can overcome whatever challenge you're facing.
Thank you so much. And honestly, I think I might have to get one of those coloring books. I love coloring. My mom will tell you that I color a lot. So I will definitely look into that, because I find it very just like therapeutic, but also it's just nice to have something that you work towards an ending, and then you get to sit back and see this beauty that you have created. So I think that is very nice, especially when a lot of caregivers can feel kind of clouded in, this isn't going to ever get better. And just finishing a simple coloring page can just kind of lift you up a bit. And it's like, okay, although it's difficult right now, I was able to color this
Yeah.
beautiful picture and
Yes.
it looks so nice. I should frame it. And it just kind of like gives you a little bit of pep
It
in your
sure does. I'm so glad you said that, sister, because that's so true. And she had gotten so frustrated. I had a lot of her coloring books. You know, she liked to color like just like you, and but it got harder and harder. So I wanted to put her picture on the back, you know, to acknowledge that she picked the 30 some pieces that are in it. And it was funny because when we were doing an outdoor visit in October, right before, you know, the winter lockdown, um, she was looking at the book on the back. And so she sees both of our pictures on the book and she says, you know, what are you doing on the back of our book? I'm like, girl, you wouldn't even have a book if it wasn't for me. And so we just laughed about that forever. And she just has the best sense of humor. But I wanted to acknowledge that no matter what stage of Alzheimer's you're in, and I want to leave the, you know, people that are going to be seeing this with this, they can still do so many things if we just work with them. And so who thought in like almost the late stages of dementia that my mom would still be able to help, you know, put together a coloring book. I'm just so proud of that. And you know how when we were little, our parents would put all our little ugly stuff that we made on the refrigerator. And I, you know, keep all the ones that she's colored. And I want her to just recognize that she can still do a lot of stuff. I don't focus on any of the things she can no longer do because that would make you crazy. But I focus on all the things she can still do, and that helps so much. So that's what I would leave the caregivers with.
Thank you so much. And I think that that is a great note to leave off on and just kind of have that feeling of hope to end on. Are there any links or where can we find your book and also your website?
So my website is really easy, lorettaveney.com. So LORETTAVENEY.com. And on the website, it has the information about how to get the books. There's a link to Amazon as well, or they can email me. There's a link on the website to email me as well if they want a signed copy, and we can arrange that as well.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I think that our caregivers have been hopefully inspired by this interview and will have a new perspective on different ways to just be creative with their caregiving. I think that that is kind of the theme that I've been thinking about during our conversation is just staying creative with your caregiving.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you so much. All right.
All righty.